Welcome to All This Science, the science podcast that describes a scientific concept in 5 minutes or less. I'm Marshall Carroll, also known as Dr. C, and I'm the host of this very special episode. So special that I might actually go over the 5 minute limit because I'm thrilled to be interviewing a fantastic person today, the President of the United States based company Polyscience, all the way from Chicago, Illinois, President Philip Preston. How you doing, Philip?
I'm well, Marshall.
Great, great. So let's get right to business here. What is the purpose of polyscience?
Well, Polyscience has our expertise in designing and producing precise temperature control equipment for a very wide range of markets. But our core is really in the scientific field.
And who uses these products? Does the aerospace industry use them?
Our products are used across an extremely broad range of applications. I say that people throughout their day, we touch their lives in every imaginable way. From a piece of plastic that was injection molded, we might have produced the chiller for it. When you wash your hair or pour the barbecue sauce, our equipment might have been used for measurement of the viscosity of that product when it was produced. We also are involved with heating and cooling of analytical instrumentation, distillation, and an extremely broad range of applications.
One of the big companies I've been doing a bit of reading is NASA. What have you been doing with the space program?
Well, we've had over decades engagement with NASA in so many areas of temperature control systems. I think a very long time ago, we actually even produced a unit that allowed for some degree of manipulation of body temperature.
Wow, that's because that's pretty important stuff up there in space. Those astronauts have to be comfortable,
Yes.
and the whole environment has to be controlled. I mean, if you're making a mistake up there, that's not a good thing. Now, I also read a bit about laser cooling of laser heads for automotive applications and other industrial processes.
Yeah, we do a lot of work in controlling the temperature of lasers. I always would have thought that a mirror would reflect 100% of light energy, but actually, a given percentage is converted to heat energy. And so we will control the temperature of lasers, whether it's small marking lasers that you might be, putting the plaque on the wall, all the way to larger metal cutting lasers. So
Right.
we're involved in that in many, many ways. I'll add to something you were mentioning though with NASA, because it's actually kind of interesting how that the equipment that we designed for them actually evolved into other areas, including suits that would be worn by doctors in the operating room treating burn victims, because a burn victim will lose their ability to control temperature. And so they have to keep the operating rooms at body temperature, which is rather warm for a surgeon to work. And so we actually produced equipment that would circulate through a vest that all of the operating room staff would wear and cool them off while they were treating the patient.
Which is
And that actually even led to equipment then that would be water jacketed headgear used for people that had to work right next to an oven, say, an example, on a paint line. And then that headgear actually ended up being incorporated into where it didn't use our equipment, but I always found it interesting that there was a recirculating loop through a cooler of ice water for race drivers, because it was proven that you make more rational decisions, literally, with a cool head.
That's right. That's right. And that's really the beauty of science, isn't it? That you appreciate it, how you do some work on NASA and it leads into work, very important work in the medical field, and leads into manufacturing, working in painting companies in these extreme heats. How the offshoots of one kind of technology starts to overlap and help the world in so many ways, which is great. Now, a little aside here, but you mentioned race car. I've heard that you have done some racing and have been involved with rebuilding cars.
I have, and actually was involved with racing motocross as a when I, much younger years, and then uh, enjoyed working on what was referred to as A production or IMSA class, Trans Am class Corvette,
Oh
and
yeah, okay.
that uh, led to then restoration of several old cars. I was always partial to the mid-year, like 63 through 7 Corvettes, and I've restored quite a number of different cars. I like the old stuff where you can just dive in and fix things without needing a laptop.
Right, right, exactly. And all those signal codes coming out. And what does that one mean? Yeah, that's great. Now, let's talk a bit about food here because temperatures have to be controlled with food. So tell me a bit about, and tell me if I'm pronouncing this right, sous vide.
Yes,
Um,
aid is something that was actually originally developed in the 1970s in France. A scientist, Bruno Gousseau, developed the technique. And, it's got a rather unfortunate name because sous vide translates to under vacuum. Uh,
right.
but really, that isn't the key attribute. It really comes down to precise temperature cooking, where you put your food in a bag. You'll typically vacuum seal it, although you can just squeeze the air out of a Ziploc, and that would work as well. The reason for vacuum sealing is predominantly so that the product sinks and you get good uh, thermal conductivity to the food. And so when I say I want a medium rare steak, for me, that would be 136 degrees Fahrenheit. And so current methodology, you expose the product to extremely high heat and you rely on precise timing. And with sous vide cooking, you open up your time window quite significantly. And because I'll take it to 136 and no more. All I need to do then, after I've achieved my desired core temperature, is just mark it in a pan or on a grill just to initiate the Maillard reaction and
Right, right.
sear marks on it.
Right. It always looks better with those grill marks, those sear marks on it, for sure. I have a friend who uses this in where are they? Halifax, Nova Scotia, and it says sous vide is the greatest thing. She's a chef there, and you have written a book about this as well, correct?
Yes, I have. Polyscience really uh, got very engaged, largely because um, I actually love cooking. I studied French cooking, um, and it is exactly what we do is precise temperature control. And so we pioneered this technique in the U.S. It was developed, as I said, in the 70s, and Bruno Gousseau was the pioneer of this, working with chefs predominantly on cooking extremely expensive proteins such as foie gras. And what was interesting is I always thought he developed this because he was colorblind. Because when a chef would show him protein and say, "This is what I want. This is the desired end result," um, he couldn't see the exact color that they were pointing
Hmm.
to. So he would grab
Interesting.
a temperature probe and stick it in, and he said, "Oh, you want this temperature." And so Uh, it then kind of died out, and we really were the guys that brought it back to the forefront and developed specific products for that market. And we did a lot of YouTube videos educating people on the technique, and subsequently, I wrote a book on it.
Now, on the opposite end of that, tell me a bit about the Ultra Griddle because I love desserts. I'm not a good cook. I burn Pop-Tarts, but I do love desserts. So this is, I think of griddle, I think of the IHOP or something, but this is a flash freezing surface system.
Yeah, actually, the anti-griddle
Oh,
started.
you're right, yeah.
Yeah, it started out when Grant Achatz was looking at, he was developing recipes before he opened a Linea restaurant, and he came to our facility for a visit to talk with me about sous vide equipment, and he saw all of the refrigeration capabilities we had, and he asked about the idea of an anti-griddle, a cold plate. And so I hit it off with Grant, and uh, I thought, well, let's try one. I actually built two, and honestly, I never thought I'd build a third one. I thought I'd build one for Grant and one for me, and that would be it. But subsequently, uh, it took off and has found lots and lots of applications. All it is really is a stainless steel griddle that runs at minus 30 centigrade. And
Right, right.
so it will unidirectionally freeze things extremely rapidly. My kids loved it when I would come into their class, for the "What does your dad do?" presentation, and I would make creme anglaise lollipops, and I could crank out a dozen of them every 90 seconds on the anti-griddle. So it's uh, it's a wonderful technique, where really nothing else that I know of can give you that maybe a frozen bottom and a liquid top. So you can create some interesting textures.
So that'll be more popular than the dad who's coming in as an accountant, I would think,
Yeah.
for that kind of thing. Um, Tell me a bit about, let's go to DNA and the PCR process and how temperature is so important in amplification and in forensic science, and that you were involved with the Human Genome Project.
Well, actually, I got a call from Cetus, who developed the PCR technology, uh, and they were using one of my refrigerated circulating baths, but they wanted to heat and cool very rapidly. And a circulating bath that they were using had about a gallon and a half of, or I think it was 6 liter recirculator. And so the time to move 6 liters from 0 centigrade to 100 centigrade was quite slow. And so I worked with them to develop a system, and the goal was, rather than taking a half hour to go from one temperature to the next, they literally wanted to heat and cool their samples in a matter of under 5 seconds. That was our goal. And
Well,
uh, at the time, I didn't know what I was working on. I just knew what the temperature control side of it involved. And we came up with a system that where I could keep a refrigeration system running with a fixed thermal mass, open a solenoid, hit the samples with extremely cold liquid, and cool them extremely rapidly. We were able to achieve that goal, and then that evolved to us building probably over 50,000 thermal cyclers that were used from everything from the O.J. Simpson case to the mapping of the human genome.
this is this is high profile stuff. It's amazing. All the the name of your company is Polyscience, and poly means many, and the applications that you've created and have used are many, and extremely important.